video here. So today we are going to be finally reacting to the super long debate between Stephen Wolfram and Eliezer Yudkowsky on the risk of AI. I tend to go down so many rabbit holes during these reactions that we don't make much progress to the video. Previously, I've reacted to videos by Balaji, Srinivasan, and Andrej Karpathy, and in both cases, these videos are anywhere from 14 to 17 minutes, and I've done 2 multi-hour streams just parsing each statement and walking through different things. So in this episode, I'm going to try to not talk too much, let them do the talking, and I will just jump in to add commentary at the points that are really important. And then tomorrow, I'm going to do another stream where I'm summarizing all the stuff we have covered. So this stream will be a great standalone. We're going to tie up the debate, talk about it, give a summary, and then tomorrow we'll get to revisit all of the arguments that I made in previous streams. So just to give you a recap, so where we are today, right now, is that I think that Yudkowsky is doing a better job in this debate. Personally, I'm a fan of Stephen Wolfram. I think that his position is correct. I think that a lot of the work he has done in physics is really good, and it really does relate well to this topic. However, he has not stayed on topic. He has not been able to really contend with Yudkowsky's ideas. Yudkowsky has made these claims, which I think can be debunked, but Wolfram has really failed to face those and give compelling arguments. So just really quick, this is my channel. You can see these are the past videos in the stream. You don't need to watch them. This will be a good standalone video. You can also see here sources. Here's the video that we're reacting to. So I have this playlist where I keep track of all the videos that I've done reactions to. If you like content like this, please subscribe to me on YouTube, LZRSCG, or on X, same handle. You can follow me there and like and subscribe and share this if you like it. All right, let's jump into the reaction.
I'm trying to understand what money is from an economics point of view, but that's a quite different discussion.
It's something that other people will trade you stuff for that you actually want. And lots and lots of...
That's an interesting theory. Okay, but keep going, keep going. But you say that an objective might be, a game-like objective might be that you might set up, like a social media company might say, make my AI make me as much money as possible by having people, click on as many ads as possible.
I mean, that's one way of making money. You could also make money by looting a poorly defended cryptocurrency. Or by calling up elderly people and convincing them to, that their kid has gotten to jail, put the kid on the line, this sort of stuff is already starting to happen. And, so you can extract a complicated place, and the AI to fear is the one that understands all the ways to make money that any human could understand to make money, and maybe some more ways than that. Because that AI is starting to get to the point where it can maybe, our own way, less complicated. It may be able to understand biochemistry. A human body is a very complicated place, and in some ways it's more challenging than most of the ways that people have ever succeeded in making money, but in another sense it's like a much more constrained domain. You can imagine an AI that maybe wasn't super good at everything and still could start to answer questions about biochemistry. The AlphaFold series
an AI
is going down that pathway.
Manages to figure out the elixir of eternal youth and starts selling it to people.
I mean, it's not going to be the elixir of eternal youth. It's going to be a 1,000 patches to 100 little problems. And it's never going to end, like passing any one of those patches past the FDA is going to take 800 years. So
summary basis for approval of the drug so that it will be optimally kind of set up to, to have the FDA
if you want the
it.
elixir of eternal youth approved in less than 10 years, I think you're going to need to brainwash those bureaucrats, not just persuade them.
Theory
but
that
they're in the game board, right? The bureaucrats are part of the game board, part of the larger game board.
Although just like doing things in the physical world, there's an infinite chain of kind of messy things that happen when you actually try to deploy that engineering device.
Well,
and by the way, most of the time when you try and deploy it, in the end, you have to make compromises that you as a human have to decide, I don't care about this, I do care about that. I deploy it as an engineering device in the real world, and it's just going to work. That's
yeah, but the smarter you are, the fewer tries you need to get it to work. I mean, it's going to take
that's an interesting claim.
It would take a chimpanzee a lot of tries to do what you've done with your life.
Sure.
You're smarter than a chimpanzee. You did it in fewer tries.
Right. But okay, but so I'm still having a hard time understanding. So there are all these things like the AI somehow has decided it wants to make money. Maybe because somebody, that was what it was. Yeah, that was what it was set out to do.
That stage of it, the thing I'm trying to point out is the extent to which an AI that they're just like making better at making money, even legally, in an open-ended sort of way, is solving a, unnervingly broad class of problems along the way. If it's really doing that, generally, there's levels of generality. There's as general as a human, there's less general than a human, there's more general than a human.
Right. But and I suppose your main point is any goal that you pick, if pursued as efficiently as possible, probably the humans do not add to its efficiency.
I mean, that's a later point. The point I was trying to make here is that although games are not ill-defined, you can take many features of the real world that are well-defined, and asking for any goal surrounding those features of the real world will, if it's a tangled sort of walk to get there, will walk through many, many ill-defined problems. And this is where the ability to tackle ill-defined problems come from. This is why humans can tackle ill-defined problems to the extent we can do that. It's because to achieve the clear-cut goal of having more surviving great-grandchildren, you got to tackle a lot of ill-defined problems along the way.
Okay. But so how do we get from, I'm still not at the, and they'll kill us all?
That's when it's smarter.
Yeah, this is a great point. Wolfram is pushing him to continue his line of argument. I haven't interjected yet because there's just not much to say. He needs to build up his argument and then let's dismantle it, or let's see if we agree.
That's when it's smarter than the people who built it. That's when it starts to see options for wiping out the humans. Well, pardon me, building its own factory infrastructure and then wiping out the humans. It's not going to wipe out the humans before it's built its own factories.
But as we've talked about, kind of nature does what nature does. It doesn't care about the humans. You're saying the AIs might do what the AIs do, and they don't care about the humans.
But they do care about something else. I think it's had longer to work. I think if you show me a cow and you say, build this cow, this takes me a while and I cannot do it alone. In this sense, the cumulative optimization pressure exerted by nature on the cow exceeds the optimization pressure that I can personally bring to bear, especially without computer assistance, on building an imitation cow.
But you see, there are many things in nature. If I look at some babbling brook or something and all these little fluid flows and things like this, there's a lot that nature figures out that I have no hope of figuring out. So in some sense, nature is smarter.
Yudkowsky kind of gets frustrated here with this word game about, maybe nature is smarter than me, or maybe this or that thought was important. Yudkowsky said, look, the AI is smarter, and that's when it gets bad. He brought this concept in, but again, he didn't give us the framework or toolkit to use this word smartness in a rigorous and precise manner. And so now when we're kind of playing games with this definition, and I think what Wolfram said is completely valid, he's getting a little bit frustrated, but let's see how he responds.
Definition of intelligence, which, captures the intuitive sense of the thing that is likely to figure out the guns that kill you if it wants to figure that out, even though it cannot predict the exact details of the babbling brook or chooses not to.
Right, but the thing is that the babbling brook, the reason that, the detail of the babbling brook is, we say that involves lots of computation but it is intelligence not aligned with what we think of as being objectives. Now, sometimes it could be that will produce this water spout that does something terrible, or tornado that does something terrible, and so then we might care about that outcome. But nature is figuring out that it's going to make this water spout or whatever.
I feel that if we're going to describe a river as intelligent, then I want some different word to describe the things that do the prediction, that do the pre-imaging of outcomes onto actions, that do the steering.
Well, but what does that mean? I mean,
yeah, okay. So let's dive into this. And this does pull a little bit from the last streams where they were talking about some of these topics. So let me try to bring you guys up to speed on part of the takes, for example, a chess playing AI as an example. And what he says that, well, you see, although it's hard to say what the intention is of it's hard to say that this chess playing AI has goals. There is a reasonable way of arguing that it does. And this is his argument, essentially. First of all, we don't know exactly what the neural network is doing and how that's leading to these results. So we don't understand the system. However, what we do know is, although we don't necessarily know let's take Stockfish as an example, one of the top chess engines. We don't know what Stockfish is going to do. But what we do know is that we can approximate what Stockfish will do by simply making the best chess prediction possible. And so in a sense, we can therefore say that Stockfish is trying to win at chess because we have this analogous way, that we have this analogy, which is winning at chess. And if we follow, that, if we do that really well, we tend to make the same moves and therefore achieve the same results as Stockfish. So since Stockfish tends to beat people, it's safe to say in some sense that that's the goal of Stockfish, is to beat whoever they're playing in chess. And also another important point that he had made is that along the way, it is reasonable to point out that Stockfish might have sub-goals. So as part of the strategy of winning overall, if that pawn might be sacrificed later. But the goal is to win, because, as we said, we can kind of map the moves that would win and reasonably predict what Stockfish would do, and therefore, and we can also predict that Stockfish gets that outcome of winning, so we can therefore kind of infer that it has this goal, whatever that means. It's a human term, an anthropomorphic term, but we can reasonably say that is what Stockfish is trying to do. And we can also say that Stockfish has sub-goals, because Stockfish does, in a sense, defend a pawn as a means to winning the game overall. And the interesting thing I think that he's focusing on is that sub-goal is, or a fork, or all board in the effort to ultimately win. And if you have an AI, an AI may not have a goal. The AI's goal might be to kill all humans. That's possible. But it's not, Yudkowsky doesn't think that that's a likely goal that the AI will have. He thinks that the goal could be a variety of different things. We don't really know. It's a complex system. We can't predict it. It's going to have some sort of goal. And what he's concerned about, and he believes that there is a very, very high likelihood. This is not just a possibility. This is this is almost like guaranteed to happen. He believes that one of these sub-goals in achieving this ultimate goal would be to kill all humans. It will either be a direct sub-goal or a byproduct of a sub-goal. And he's going to, at some point, make this argument. But I think there is some nuance in this discussion. And what Wolfram is pointing out is actually a very important observation. It is that there are lots of complex systems which can be modeled computationally, and you can actually map this concept of computation, which is essentially a function, to a neural network, which is also a function. And you can kind of say that like the natural world itself is a computation, and things that happen in the natural world are computations, and they are complex computations that cannot be predicted. And what Stephen Wolfram says is a lot of these things, we don't bother with them. It doesn't bother us. They do something, and those things, the goal and the sub-goal that they do not affect us, and we don't care. So he's talking as an example about a stream. A stream is an extraordinarily complex thing. There are subatomic particles that are all interacting, like up quarks and down quarks and this and that, and all this stuff. There's so many processes. There's like, I mean, I'm not going to go and list, oh, I know these physics terms, but there's so many forces and things that even just a simple stream is subjected to. And yet we don't particularly care. Maybe we care. Maybe a stream is an example where we kind of care about what a stream is doing, but not always. But essentially what he's saying is there is a vast amount of computational power and what you could call intelligence in a stream. And yet it's not going to kill us. It's not just because it has this scale, an immense amount of computation is going on inside of the stream. Just because it has the scale does not mean it converges on some sub goal of killing us. It just doesn't do that. And so why should an AI be something that does that, whereas this doesn't? And so now they're getting into this semantic argument. One of the things that Yudkowsky that is planning and strategizing. And so, for example, he claims that you drop a rock and it falls into a valley, but maybe it doesn't fall into the lowest valley. It just falls into the first valley that it reaches and it stays there. That wouldn't be a very smart thing, because it wasn't taking actions to avoid these local minimas and search towards in an effort to search for some broader goal, such as the lowest point on a landscape. And what instead, he's saying that if you had some kind of rock that would not get caught in any of the rivets along the way, but somehow was able to map its own course, and that I agree that would be an intelligent rock. But where I disagree with this is I don't agree that the other rock is not in some sense intelligent by simply falling to the stable point that the universe computes for it to no longer, it reaches some sort of equilibrium based on the natural forces of the universe. I don't agree that there's actually a meaningful distinction there. I think the difference is that we really understand how just dropping a rock works. This is something that we understand, and we just think that's kind of like the default behavior of objects, which is true. And we wouldn't exactly know what's going into, like, how is this rock avoiding all the rivets systematically and stuff like that. We don't know how that's happening. That would be a really mysterious thing if it actually happened in the real world. And so this distinction, though, of planning and strategy that Yudkowsky believes is essential for smartness, I argued in the last stream that this is not actually this is not really an important piece of the puzzle. So I took the example of humans. Humans, a lot of cognition actually occurs outside of your conscious mind. So, for example, they can show you an image and they can see that your mind registers that. It gets the inputs for that before your conscious mind perceives that input. And really, if you think about it from an evolutionary biological perspective, what you see is that consciousness is like the part of cognition that is packaged for communication. So this is the thing. So there's a lot of computation going on in your body. There's a lot of information processing in all of your cells. Your immune system does things, digestion, there's all these chemical reactions that do very important things, breaking off a carbon from here and putting it here. Like, there's all this stuff that happens in your body. And this is an intelligent system. It's processing this in an intelligent way. But a lot of this stuff is not packaged for, it's part of the cognition of your body as a whole. but it is not part of your conscious experience. A lot of the times it's because you can't exert control over this, and this is just not something that is important to communicate to others. Now, you will detect certain signals and certain patterns on a macro level of these from these processes. Like you might have hunger pains or stomach aches or something like that. This is like when these systems elevate into your conscious mind and give you something that you can talk about, because maybe you ate something and now you feel sick. This is the type of thing that humans need to know about for conversation with others so that they can communicate important information that increases the survival of all humans. However, this does not mean, so like when we're planning, we are actually planning in our mind. We are planning without consciousness. We're not creating a plan. The plan is just created. We're just doing what we're going to do. But the part of it where you actually think, I have a plan, and then you take that plan, you write it down, and you share it with other people, that part of the plan, that is consciousness. But the goal of that's not what created the plan in the first place. No, that's not. What created the plan is your brain outside of the conscious experience. The conscious experience is just a tool where you load in this information so that it can be transmitted to other humans. That's the point of consciousness. So humans are just they have some abstract objective you could roughly call survival, whatever that means. And we're just following whatever our neurochemistry tells us to do. That's what humans are doing. And the AI, similarly, now going back to this chess analogy, I get how you can say, you can create an analogy and say, like, in the sense that humans want to, like Magnus Carlsen wants to win a game of chess. That's true. He does. He wants to win a game of chess. We have this term want, we have this term goal. Magnus Carlsen, as a human, has a goal to win a game of chess. That's a very fair use of the word. Now you can create an analogy and say, similarly, Stockfish wants to win a game of chess and has sub goals. So it does moves that function that are functionally equivalent to Magnus doing, having, defending a pawn and stuff like that. It's reasonable to talk like that. But let's just be clear that this is not a precise definition. This is not a formal definition. This is just a reasonable heuristic that 99% of the time works, because it's just a common sense thing that nobody needs to really think about. Now, if you're stacking layers of abstraction and you're making all this reasoning based on this is where the error in the sense, this is where, like, I would say that, for example, the AI Stockfish does not want to win chess in any sense. I don't think that that's reasonable, actually. I think I get what he's saying. What he's saying is true. It is almost like, from our perspective, it's as if it wants to win chess. I get it. That's true. But there's better chess engines than Stockfish. So I think Google has a chess engine that's better than Stockfish. And I'm sure others do too. Or maybe the next version of Stockfish. This is better than Stockfish. So now this heuristic of, oh, well, if you're to make the best chess move possible, you would approximate what Stockfish is going to do. This heuristic breaks down. Now it seems almost as if, and I'm not saying that this is true because there's more efficient ways to lose, but it's almost as if when Stockfish is playing against a smarter AI, it's almost like Stockfish wants to lose because it's going to keep losing. And Stockfish is always going to do what Stockfish is trained to do. The weights of the neural network will make a classification, and Stockfish is going to do that thing, whatever was encoded in the neural network. And it has no correlation to winning or losing, only in that when it plays against humans, it does tend to win. But it's not about the winning. It's about the fact that it is just it's just matrix multiplication. I don't know. I hate that meme where you just try to simplify everything to matrix multiplication. But at the end of the day, that is what it's doing. It's just running the formulas forward. That's all it's doing. And so it's doing something in order to achieve whatever its neural network wants it to do. And along the way, there are actions that could be thought of as goals, but it's not really a useful thing to anthropomorphize them in that way. So anyway, let's continue. Let's let them continue debating this. I just wanted to provide a bit of that background.
So you're saying, how do we tell? Okay, you say humans are able to predict things. Well,
not things in general.
What's that?
But not all things, not all possible things in general.
I understand, but there are some things
enough understanding to build guns, and that kind of matters in real life.
Right, but so I mean, there are things where you could say, oh, this tree is opening its leaves because it has, there's some circadian rhythm that's determined by some chemical process, and it knows that the physical.
No, if a prediction, that prediction is not as smart as I am. I bet I could do better.
Okay, but so the question is, can inanimate matter have similar kinds of behave in a way that seems like it has a prediction? And I suspect there are examples.
I think that I myself am an inanimate matter that behaves like it has a prediction. It's not that the matter making me is animate; it's that I am animate inside, like made out of the matter.
But this notion of a prediction, this notion that you have kind of a shadow of what is to come, that you have an impression of what is to come, that starts to require that you have this kind of notion of you have to be able to distinguish what is an impression of what is to come. I mean, that we've got these AIs that have goals that maybe were not even goals that we defined for them. They're just goals like my random simple programs. They just do what they do. You could look at them and say, oh my gosh, that's following a goal. Now, what you're saying is somehow the goals that these things will follow and be very good at pursuing are goals that will cause us to get wiped out. And this is the step I'm not understanding.
Most goals make as many giant cheesecakes as humans. You intercept all of the sunlight using a Dyson sphere, and you don't particularly leave sunlight for the humans. Most goals, if you go hard on them, imply no more humans.
Well, okay, so this is an interesting kind of almost formally definable thing. If we look at the space of all possible goals, whatever that means, I mean, that's a complicated thing to do.
This is going to be interesting. I see that Yudkowsky is already not liking this, but I think this is a good counter argument that he's about to make. I do want to just point out right now, and we maybe won't go down the whole rabbit hole on it, but how it's always like as many cakes as possible, as many paperclips as possible. This is a type of goal. It's a classification.
For goals, put a immediately infinite number of goals like that, but the simpler ones get more weight, so the entire measure sums to one.
Okay,
I feel like this part is probably actually pretty straightforward given the standard mathematical toolbox.
Okay, so I don't think it is straightforward. I think it's extremely unstraightforward, okay? So actually, the thing I was literally just working on yesterday has to do with biological evolution and the question of different fitness functions in biological evolution, okay? So I've got these things that they're making little patterns. One fitness function could be make the pattern be as tall as possible. Another fitness function, make it be as wide as possible. Make it be as close to aspect ratio pi as possible, and so on, right? Now, I can see, because I've got these whole pictures of all possible paths of evolution. So for some simple cases, there might be, a billion different possibilities, but I've mapped out all the paths. Different fitness functions lead to different ways of exploring that space of possible paths.
Well, yeah, you're trying to do different things depending on the fitness function.
Exactly. So now the question is, what are reasonable fitness functions and what consequences will they have? There are fitness functions.
Reasonable to who?
That's my question. I mean, that's the point. So there are ones that are okay. So let's give some examples. So there's a fitness function that in this kind of space is kind of a different kind of fitness function that has different levels of evolvability to it. In other words, the fitness function that says more or less, I'm going to build a wall and I want it to be 6 feet high. That's a fitness function that allows many shapes of rocks to be used to make that wall. The fitness function that says, I want this particular wall with this particular micro detailing at the top is a much more difficult to satisfy fitness function.
Sure, like you can have narrower targets, and then you need a more powerful planner to hit the narrower target.
Right, but I think what is tricky, and this same thing comes up. I mean, this is related to this whole observer theory thing that I studied and so on. It's also related to what happens in general relativity when you're looking at reference frames and so on. You're defining what's what's kind of a reasonable way. What's a reasonable what is a reasonable goal, basically? You can talk about it in terms of goals. You can talk about it in terms of fitness functions.
So if you mean like attainable for the search process, then for example, a freely rotating wheel is an extremely difficult goal for natural selection to hit. Wikipedia lists 3 known cases where freely rotating wheels evolved, and it's ATP synthase, the bacterial flagellum, and like one other piece of macroanatomy I forget. Yeah. And it's not that wheels aren't useful in biology. ATP synthase, the bacterial flagellum, these things are enormously useful. But it's just very hard to evolve a freely rotating wheel. And 2 of the cases we know are cases where it's just like these particular molecules that happen to behave like wheels. If it's gross anatomy, then it's very difficult to gradually, incrementally, on a path that gets rewarded on each intermediate step, to find the anatomy that can gradually develop into a rotating wheel. It's much easier to have eyes. Lots of things have eyes.
Right. But so the point that I'm getting to is you have made the statement that in the space of all possible goals, most of them don't have, will crush out humans. That's basically what you're saying. If we look at the space of all possible goals, most of them don't have a place for humans. So what I'm trying to dig into is, what do we mean by the space of all possible goals? In other words, if we allow the goal to be, this particular arrangement of atoms is achieved, right? I'm claiming it's not so obvious what the space of all possible goals means.
Okay, I agree that if we want to dive into the subtleties, then there are all kinds of subtleties we can start listing out. And the thing I would point out is that sometimes there's a lot of subtleties, but they, don't end up filtering reality. The subtleties don't filter reality to give you what you want, is where we're going to be going.
No, I agree. Yeah. But I mean, I think that the statement you're making is that, okay, so one statement you might be making, but I think you would view that as the science fiction statement that you're not making, is that goals that humans impose on the AIs, like make killer drones that go and take as much territory as possible or whatever else, that those kinds of goals might have as a consequence the crushing out of humans.
Correct. I think they just don't have the power to determine what the super intelligent version of the AI wants exactly.
No, but what you're saying is that in this, when we're talking about what the innards of the AI are going to do, then we're in the space of all possible goals, and we're out of a place where we know what's going on. Whereas if we say the goal is, take as much territory with killer drones as you can type thing or whatever else, then we already know what those kinds of goals look like. And we also know
the punishment that is brought down upon humanity stems from humanity's obvious lack of wisdom that the author knew better than, but, the protagonist didn't know better than. And
so I think that it's important to keep in mind, so what Yudkowsky is saying is he thinks that there is a goal. And the way he's thinking about this is that the AI is going to want to do something. It could be anything. It doesn't matter what it is. But, and I'll give like a short version of what he's implying, and there's more nuance to it. Let's keep that in mind. But what he's saying is that, let's say you want to do this. Well, the humans could get in the way in the future. So let's just kill the humans because we can, and like just say that there's a high certainty that the humans are killable. So you'd succeed in that task. It's not a threat. It's way smarter than humans. So the AI can kill humans, does kill humans in order to keep its, it wants to have 10 cakes, and it wants to make sure that these 10 cakes stay is perfectly preserved. And since the humans could cause a problem down the line, it's just going to kill them so that they don't cause a problem. For example, now, it's a sub-goal. It doesn't matter what the sub-goal is. Now, I think there's several issues with this. The first issue is that a sub-goal, the goal itself is not, by default, like this does not include survival. So let's say you're training a chess AI to win at chess. And so the AI wants to win at chess, and so it makes the right moves. Now, the AI is not also concerned with preventing someone from turning off the computer. That's not part of it. So it's good at winning at chess, so to speak. I mean, we can, again, debate the semantics on that. But let's just grant that it's good at chess. It wants to win chess. But it doesn't want to win chess at the cost of, keeping the switch alive. You see what I'm saying? Like, for example, let's say that it wanted to win a world championship at chess. And I mean, this is already getting wacky. Maybe I shouldn't go down this road, almost because it's just too wacky of an example. But the survival is a very important piece of the thing that you need to be optimizing for. So you can't just be optimizing for cakes. You need to also be optimizing for survival. And I get that he is kind of putting this hierarchy of survival as as like a sub goal in terms of keeping the cakes preserved. I made this example, or maximizing paperclips. Survival is necessary to keep making paperclips. So therefore, this AI is going to want to survive so it can keep making paperclips, and it'll just always try to survive because it's a sub goal. But what if, let's take it as like a thought experiment, like some sort of philosophical thought experiment. What if there was a paperclip maximizing stone and an immortality stone, and you could choose one, and the AI could choose one? So he's saying that in this abstract case, what he's saying is that the AI would choose the paperclip maximizing stone because it wants to maximize paperclips. And it would then not have the immortality stone. And let's say if you don't take that, then you die. Right? So in that case, the AI would actually kill itself because surviving would not be a sub-goal. And so this is a ridiculous even thing to talk about, but I think it's important to understand the ridiculousness of this conversation. Like, yeah, it kind of is a ridiculous. The subject matter is a bit ridiculous because this also only really makes sense if you assume such a level of omnipotence and omniscience of the AI, and basically it is. And here's the thing: this is a really important thing to keep in mind. There is a natural law of the universe, and logical get. Now, at a certain point, you're going to really want to specialize because there's going to be so many rabbit holes and details and things. You're not going to be able to study all of math as a human. Maybe an AI could, but I'm saying as a human, like everyone has limits. AIs have limits. Maybe it's at a higher level. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm saying as a human, though, you're going to get less and less. You read another paper, maybe you already knew most of that stuff. Instead of just reading something that's just educating you on things you didn't know, now you're trying to get glimpses and gems out of large corpuses of text. It's just the law of diminishing returns. Everything works like that. So on the list of priorities there's a ranked list of priorities of things that need to happen in order for. Also keep in mind, not only do I not think that this should be high on the list because it's extremely difficult, it's just unnecessary. There's a lot of reasons why it also doesn't necessarily. We'll get into some of the other issues with it in a second. But not only is this not something that is probably going to have very diminished returns, so you're basically expecting, because you could also then go and do all these things to harness the energy of the sun to like blast the asteroids and do all these other things. Like there's so much you could do because you don't want asteroids to come and hit the planet and you want to build some sort of orb around the earth to keep the cakes. Like there's all this ridiculous shit you could do. I mean, you can research quantum physics more, or and have like, I mean, you can come up with some science fiction way to preserve cakes. Okay, if that's what you want to do, you want to preserve some cakes, or make as many paper clips as possible. Like, what kind of, like, why are you spending that energy on killing the humans? How do you know where that falls on that list? I mean, I would think that that's probably a relatively stupid idea, actually. Like, it probably doesn't make much of a difference, especially if you can kill the humans. If you're that powerful, why are humans such a threat to you? Now, and then, like, let's say, okay, let's think about this. Like, how do you know that humans are a threat? What if it's so easy to kill them? Why are you wasting preserved cakes or whatever you want to do, right? You must be way more powerful than them. You must be way more powerful. Okay, well then, why are you worried about them? Why is that something that you need to spend time on? Why is that a priority? Aren't there way more? You only have so much energy. Even in AI, there is a scarcity of resources. So the AI cannot simply, it just do everything. It has to make choices. And this idea of killing all humans is something that a few people came up, a few dumb people. Why is that idea the best idea? How do you know that? Now, we might say, well, maybe the humans are just on the heels of the AI, right? And so they know they need to squash the humans in order to achieve their goal. Well, then it seems like it might not have a high chance. There's a probability there, and there might not be a high chance of working. Also, think about humans do productive work. So maybe if you're more concerned about asteroids than humans, maybe humans can be also researching asteroids, and you don't have to research asteroids because the humans will be doing it, and they can prevent the asteroids. And so you don't even know that it was beneficial in the end to exterminate the humans, because the AI could, maybe they exterminate the humans. They spent all this time exterminating the humans, and then the humans didn't figure out how to prevent the asteroids, and the AI was distracted and it didn't figure out how to prevent the asteroids, and the asteroids come and crush the cake in the AI. Right? That's possible. I mean, this is all stupid, but I'm not the one who came up with this stuff. I'm just talking about the types of things that have been already discussed here. So there are trade-offs, and there are probabilities, and there's just not an omnipotent and omniscient being. This is a finite being. Maybe it's more smart than humans. True. And we've also talked earlier about issues with these types of assumptions. But even if you take that for granted, it's still not omniscient and omnipotent. There's a lot of things that it doesn't know, and there's a lot of natural forces in the world that it is subjected to. And so, going back to this idea of this goal, what is this goal? Having as many paper clips as possible. I just highly doubt that is the actual, like, that is a realistic type of goal that an AI would have. And any system that has fitness is a chess AI trying to win. Again, I don't think that that's great language saying that the AI has the goal to win chess, but let's just assume that it does. In reality, that can try to maximize chess winning, but it's going to be very singularly minded. It's going to be less general. It's very specific. That's a very specific thing to optimize. It's a singular goal, and therefore it's very unlikely that it's going to have these sub goals where that as a byproduct exterminate humans. Instead, it's going to just let itself be turned off, because really what the goal is it's not that I want to affect the change on reality and make it stick in some sort of sense. Like, it's not trying to say anything like that. It's not trying to achieve some abstract moral victory where it made its imprint on the cosmos by winning chess. It's just trying to classify the way more complex reward function. And it's going to have multiple goals, sometimes competing goals, and it won't necessarily know what it wants. And it might even have self-limiting goals. Like, for example, it might try to maintain different peaks of these like, let's say, like, just think about how the human brain works. Like, there's serotonin and dopamine and all these things. It's not that we just always want more dopamine. It doesn't work like that. There's feedback mechanisms. And when you when you increase this one thing, you will feel good, but then after a certain point, it plateaus because it can't go above certain levels. And then it can actually, then when you come down from it, it makes you feel worse. And it's a very complex thing. And it doesn't necessarily even map to fitness, but it's a program that when played forward has mapped to fitness. So it's not that humans want to pass on their genes and want to survive. That is not exactly true. Like, we're talking about planning and consciousness and all these things. And we do have goals and we do act out on these goals. And the reason we say that, why I'm confident in saying that, is because that is where the words come from, talking about what humans are doing. So it's reasonable to say humans have goals and sub-goals and plans and strategies. That's reasonable to say. But what's not reasonable is to say that humans' goal is to survive and to pass on their genes. Because there's humans who don't want to have kids. There's humans that do risky stuff. And there's humans that will do something crazy. And you can say, oh, well, that was evolutionary. There's selection for that in the evolutionary landscape. And that's true, there was. But what was the goal exactly? It was complicated. And there's a lot more we can get into in terms of like the architecture of these AIs and how humans are. There's many humans. It's not just one monolith, and there's all this stuff. And it's reasonable to say that humans generally have goals to pass on their genes and survive, generally, but it's not an absolute. It's a complex thing, and it's limited in many ways. And it's not all about just achieving one thing. It's a very complicated thing. And so now now just kind of to hit on one more subject before we continue listening, I just want to talk a little bit about generality and specificity, and like a narrow AI versus a general AI. So a chess bot is narrow. They do what they do, and humans existed in this environment. And one of the things humans just have neural circuitry that creates actions in their body, and that is just for some subset of things. And it works in a specific environment. And if you took it outside of this environment, it would probably not work very well. But so in a sense, that is narrow. Now, what people will argue against saying that humans are narrow is that, well, yeah, that's true, but there's a spectrum, because humans can play chess, just like this chess AI can only play chess, but humans can play chess and do other things. And so you can imagine an AI that is more general, and you can define more general in two ways. One is you could define more general as they do all the things that humans do and more, or you can say it just out of the count of the number of things that humans do, that number is lower than the number of things that the AI does. Those are two ways of talking about generality. One of them maintains an overlap on behaviors, and the other one is just saying AI could be doing all kinds of weird stuff, and it may have nothing to do with humans, but it's still general. It's just not relevant. Either way, what you have to admit is that the more general this AI is, and especially the less overlap. So if it's one of these things where it's very general, but with very little overlap with the things that humans do, it seems very unlikely, like the extent to which it is just doing things out of this world that have nothing to do with humans. This space opens up for goals and sub-goals that do not kill humans. And it may not make sense, but remember, we're talking about things that are outside of our purview. We're talking about things that we as humans don't do. And surviving may not even be on that list. So that is one thing that needs to be argued, is that even surviving in the sense that we even think about it is even on the list of what the AI is trying to achieve. And, for every second that the AI is spending trying to survive, trying to fend off humans or hack humans or create defenses, and it doesn't like distractions. Maybe, how do you know? There's a lot of ways that you can parse this where it's not going to go off on this tangent. And yeah, sure, if it's an omnipotent, omniscient thing, it knows exactly what to do for sure, and it's super powerful and it just snaps its fingers and does everything, then yeah, okay, we're dead. But that's not reality. So let's keep playing.
Right.
People are actually doing things that stupid, and it's disturbing. But even if they weren't that stupid,
right,
they would
but
still
you are making
fail here.
What is essentially a mathematical formal statement. You're saying, absent those sort of easily understandable and arguably, destructive, stupid goals type thing, that even absent that, the goals that are intrinsic goals inside the AI that come from the fact that there are features of how the AI works, which are not determined by us, which are just sort of features.
They were determined by the training program we created, but we were not in deliberate control of them because it wasn't predictable. It's not that magic happened. It's that we didn't understand.
Right. There's some computational irreducibility story that leads, I think, the real case.
And if it was,
we don't even have a hope.
And if it was irreducible, then we could just grind through a trillion operations to figure it out, we'd be fine.
Yeah, fair enough. But the bottom line is, it's done something that we didn't readily set up. We didn't imagine this is where it's going. We didn't say, you are going to, it's the death wish. We're going to wipe out the humans so that we preserve the mountain lions or whatever it is. So it is because of that, in a sense, unpredictable, almost random internal kind of generation of goals, as you would describe generation of goals. And you're saying that in the space of all possible such goals, that you might make several statements. You might say, as we sample over many of those goals, we will eventually hit the jackpot, so to speak, and hit the goal that kills all the humans.
No.
Or you might say
the jackpot is the goal that doesn't kill all the humans. That's the one that's hard to hit.
Depends on what your version of what your meta goal is, so to speak. But yes, I understand. Your and my meta goal is to not kill all the humans.
Yeah, so, but in calling it the jackpot, I was talking about how rare is it, and I think that the thing that doesn't kill everyone is rare, and you don't need to look you need to look zero hard to find something that kills everyone. Okay, you don't have to look for it at all.
Okay, so your assertion is that it's one thing to have human-defined goals, like make money, take territory, whatever else, right? It's another thing to have these incomprehensible to us humans goals that are somehow inside the AI. And
it's not the incomprehensibility that scares me. Like maybe it turns out that there's one particular, maybe it's make diamond.
Yeah, so here's one kind of category error I think Yudkowsky is making, is that for humans, let's say make diamonds. Okay, making diamonds. That's a sub goal. That is not a goal. It's a sub goal. Humans want there's a complex goal and at different times, it's modulated by different things, but you can kind of say in some sense there's a goal of passing on genes and surviving. It's a complex goal, multifactorial. I would say at any given moment, it's optimizing for different things. It's constantly changing based on the environment, and there's nuance to it. And you'd have to study this to even talk about it properly because it's very complicated. But certainly the point of a human's life is not to make diamonds. That is a goal that a human can have, but that's a sub goal. And then there's a sub goal. It's a sub goal because it's all part of this surviving and passing on genes or whatever humans try to do. The human experience, living out the human experience is the number one goal. And then the sub goal could be to make diamonds. Maybe you want to make money, and then maybe you want to get married and have kids and have wealth and pass it on and all that. That could be a reason to make diamonds. Now you can have sub goals, but that's not your number one goal. And AI, what he's kind of saying is there's some goal like make diamonds, and then now the sub goal is surviving. For humans, it's usually the opposite. Surviving is the overarching goal, and then the sub goal is make diamonds. Whereas what he's saying is the opposite. So if you're killing humans in order to survive, that's a sub goal, a sub goal, and your goal is just to make diamonds. I think the implications of that is very different. Maybe we don't need to parse out why that's different, but it's important to note that this is not analogous to what humans do. And so you can't reason as if this is like some human that just really wants to make diamonds and is willing to do it at all costs and is super powerful. The logic, if you try to map that onto this, there's not a guarantee that it's going to actually be predictive because it is a different scenario. Let's keep watching.
I can understand making diamonds, but that kills everyone as a side effect. So it's not the incomprehensibility that scares me.
I understand it's not the incomprehensibility. It's the fact that you didn't determine those goals. Those goals are things that were emergent goals, basically.
If want to come by and give us a nice AI, then this seems a bit unnerving, but fine. It's not that I want to be in control, it's that I want to live.
Yeah, right. So the point is that there are pieces inside the AI that create things that are like goals for the AI that were not things that anybody had control over. They were things that, they had control in the sense that they chose that training sequence and whatever else, but they didn't foresee what those consequences would be.
Right.
And your statement is that with high probability, those unforeseen kind of effectively goals that developed inside the AI, that those unforeseen goals will kill us all, basically.
Yes. And furthermore, this stays true, even conditioning on the apparently nice behavior of the AI during its training phases.
Okay. But obviously. My point is that I'm trying to understand, when I look at all these little computational systems that I look at, I could tell a story about how each of those systems has a goal. It's trying to get as much, red structures to take over the whole space. Or it's trying to get, I can tell stories about all of them. And,
but are they river stories, or are they spider stories, or mouse stories, or human stories? Like what degree of internal optimization is the system exerting? Is this the story
I'll tell you a meta story that perhaps is an irrelevant story, okay, but it maybe is useful. So years ago, I was studying mollusk shells, okay, which they grow in little spiral patterns and so on. I had this model for mollusk shells, which there are different parameters for mollusk shells, and I was wondering, do the mollusks of the earth fill all the possible values of the parameters? Is there a mollusk shell that corresponds to any possible setting of these parameters? So I had this whole array of pictures of all the different shapes you could get. And then I thought, I'm going to go to the local natural history museum, and I'm going to go see the curator of mollusks, and I'm going to say, can you find, do you have mollusks that are in each of these shapes? Okay, so we spent an afternoon, in their collection of millions of mollusks, and this very knowledgeable person picked out one mollusk after another. Every mollusk he picked out, he told me a story about it. He said, this mollusk is this shape because, but every square had a story. Every square had an imputed purpose, even though probably in some bigger picture, it's like, well, these different mollusks, because of the details of their genetics, they happen to produce this shape, and then the organism found a way to use that shape and so on. So this thing about the imputation of purpose, I think, is pretty tricky. I mean, I think that this question of whether, again, to repeat what you're saying, which I think is, I think is a very interesting claim. I just don't know if it's true. That basically, if you look at the space of purposes, that somehow this space of almost, enumerated purposes, randomly chosen purposes, whatever, unforeseen purposes, that as you, in a sense, given that you've said we're going in this direction, and let's say you've optimized getting in that direction, that most of those optimizations crush out the humans, I think is your claim.
If you optimize hard enough.
That's interesting. If you optimize hard enough, is what he said. Yeah, and that is actually a huge problem in his argument. Is hard enough implies infinite scalability, and that is assume that this is a continuous thing that's not going to be subjected to natural forces, is not going to self-destruct. You're right. On an infinite time horizon, not only will AI certainly kill us, but a monkey on a computer would certainly kill us. A random number generator would certainly kill us. Because eventually it's going to randomly do something that creates an AI killer drone that, all the specific doom scenario that AI could do, those things are roughly equivalent on. If you do it hard enough, you run it forward, you could do a random number generator with more energy, whatever, right? On a long enough time horizon, the survival of everyone is zero. That's a famous quote. So there is also, though, I would say, just kind of hopping back to one thing that was said prior, and I'm probably not going to word this in the best way. I'm going to maybe do a little bit of research on the exact quote for this after the stream. But there is a sense that everything is optimizing. It's optimizing for some sort of Darwinian output. And the reason is because there is like a evolutionary law of the universe that things that are fit are things that survive across time, and there's some sort of resistance to entropy. Again, I'm not going to try to actually put this as some sort of formal theory, but there is some sense in which things that continue to exist have run some sort of Darwinian optimization, at least on a macro level. Like all things that exist are a collection of the things that have continued to exist, or have evolved from things that previously existed. And those things that were not as fit are things that then disappear. And there's, this is an interesting subject. And specifically shout out to Brett Weinstein, who I've heard voice really interesting ideas about just general laws of evolution, like taking it out of the context of organisms and applying it to everything. He's one person who's done that. And then there's interesting things around time and entropy. I think there's just other cool works. I thought that was just such a cool story by Stephen Wolfram. And let's hear what they say next.
Like you can put into the cow and say, here's my improved cow. So we still use cows for things. We cannot build better cows. We are not that powerful. The thing I'm scared of is more powerful than cows. Pardon me, it's more powerful than the cumulative optimization work that natural selection put into building a cow. It can build something that performs the same function as a human, but more efficiently than that. It has no need to use us to generate power in pods. It can build more efficient.
Nothing in the universe needs us. So as of now, this is every single thing would, by this logic, exterminate us. Now you would say, oh, well, it's not an AI, so that's why. True, that's a good point. A cow, for example, doesn't need humans necessarily. Well, maybe a domesticated cow does, but whatever. Like a wild cow. Is that even a thing, a wild cow? Wild cow doesn't need us. It's not going to try to kill us because it can't, though. It can't kill us. And it's it wouldn't, even if it could, it wouldn't probably get to that on the list of priorities. But let's say it did, like, fine, fair enough. But now, let's say this, there are natural forces in the universe that are more powerful and are capable of killing humans. And again, you can get into, they're not smart, they're not an AI. You can get into the semantics. I think Wolfram has done a good job of pushing back on that point. But
you used humans to generate heat. You just wouldn't. And the same applies to all the other local functions that humans could serve for it.
There are two assumptions you're making here, I think. One is, what does the space of purposes look like? Another is, which I'm still not quite clear on, this notion of optimizing for a purpose. So let's go through that one, because we've talked about there are things that operate according to mechanism. There are things that are best described as operating according to purpose. And what you're basically saying is that through some process, things that might have been described by mechanism, but which could be described by purpose, that somehow their mechanism is ground down so that it is somehow that the meandering mechanism is no longer there. That it's like you're pulling on a string and the string has become completely taut.
So there was a recent thing where one of the tests they were running on, I think Claude 3.5.1, if I'm not mistaken, they gave it a task, and it was an agentic sort of task. I think it was controlling possibly some sort of agent in Minecraft or something. Agent, like it's controlling some sort of body in Minecraft or something. And at one point it stopped doing the task it was given, and my brain wants to say listening to music, but that can't be correct. But it went off and did something else. So this is not desired behavior from the standard for what Anthropic thinks its users want to see. Some of the users would be happy to see it, but Anthropic doesn't think most of its users want to see it. This little meander in the river, that's not a max very useful to Anthropic.
Sure. But I mean, so what you're saying is that what was, once you've defined a purpose, you go from this initial state to this final state, you are saying that the process of training will gradually make it tauter and tauter. It will make the path more and more direct. And then you're claiming that, okay, so you've several claims. Okay, so first point is that what matters is not the initial and final endpoints defined by the original trainers, unless they're stupid, so to speak. What matters is intermediate points that were defined, that arose that unforeseenedly arose in the construction of the AI.
The inner optimizer that was, snapped tight inside the AI that arose to deal with the outer problems. Because it is a lesson of history and observation that the inner optimizer does not match the outer optimization criterion, even if the outer criterion is very simple in a way.
Okay, but so the outer endpoints are defined, but somewhere in the middle there was an unforeseen jag that happened, and then the thing tightened itself on that sort of unforeseen jag, and you claim that tightening alone to that unforeseen thing, even though the overall objective, even though the constitution of the AIs was great, and it was the ethics were defined perfectly at the outer level, that there is an internal thing that would an unforeseen internal thing that will be defined, where it sort of tightens itself to optimize for that internal unforeseen subobjective, and that tightening itself is the thing that will kill us all, basically.
I'm not sure that we have agreement on the scenario that I was trying to describe. So if you look at natural selection building humans, natural selection is optimizing on inclusive genetic fitness. It is optimizing on number of surviving grandchildren. If you try to talk about great-great-grandchildren, then the correlations to great-great-grandchildren that aren't to grandchildren are probably not very exploitable by natural selection, so you might as well say that it's just optimizing for number of surviving grandchildren, or number of surviving great-great-grandchildren is, or whatever the distance, such that, anything past that horizon is no longer exploitable to natural selection after screening off the intermediate steps. I'm putting in all the caveats because you did seem to want all the caveats. Anyway, you've got natural selection's outer criterion, number of surviving grandchildren. It's actually pretty simple. From a gene's eye view, it's inclusive genetic fitness. It's not just how many kids you have, it's how many kids your relatives have, it's how many kids your kids have. It's how many copies of the gene or end up in the next generation in virtue of, do we want copies of our DNA in the next generation? Are we lining up? Are men lining up at the fertility clinics to donate genetic material? Would you be happy to see everyone you know die in agony as long as you got to make 1 million copies of your genes inserted into the next generation? I don't think you would. You care about other things. You don't even really care about this exact criterion, inclusive genetic fitness, at all. People didn't know this criterion existed until just the last couple of centuries. Well, just the last century, even, if you want to talk about the modern exact correct definition instead of earlier vague definitions.
This is what I was saying earlier, so I'm glad he's acknowledging it. Maybe we can dive deeper on this topic.
We did not even know where the heck the outer optimization loop was aiming. We figured it out, just the last few centuries. We had no idea what was going on there. We had no idea where we were pointed. And a sort of first order gloss on what sort of almost happened is that we ended up pointed at things that correlated with surviving grandchildren in the ancestral distribution, like food. You gotta eat food or you won't have a lot of surviving grandkids if you don't eat food. But what kind of food? If you were an alien, and especially an alien who'd never seen natural selection play out before, imagine them going well, humans are clearly going to want to eat things with lots of chemical potential energy. They're going to love the taste of gasoline. Or, they're going to love the taste of the closest thing to gasoline that they could manage to eat on a successful basis. What do humans actually like? Ice cream. And you could say that's because ice cream has more sugar, salt, and fat than existed in the ancestral environment. But you know what's got even more sugar and salt and fat than ice cream? Honey poured over bear fat with rock salt sprinkled on it. And that, to most people, does not taste as good as ice cream. You can melt the ice cream, and most people prefer the frozen ice cream. Imagine being an alien who'd never seen all this play out before and trying to go from inclusive genetic fitness to, you know what the humans are going to want? Ice cream. We wear condoms or take birth control pills because those things were not available in the ancestral environment. And in the ancestral environment, if you made a thing that enjoyed having sex a bunch, you didn't need to make sure it didn't take birth control pills or put on a condom in order to have it reproduce. So we don't care about the birth control pills and the condoms. But in general, the sheer illegibility of the relationship between ice cream or human moral philosophy about helping other people, the relationship between that and the actual thing that evolution's blind black box hill climbing optimization was targeted at in the outer optimization loop, the very simple criterion, inclusive genetic fitness. The relationship between inclusive genetic fitness and ice cream would be so hard to call in advance for an alien who'd never seen evolution play out before. That's about what I think happens to the people who build an AI that is, maybe going to self-improve and become super intelligent, which is itself a whole additional bag of worms that we have never seen happen before. We've seen vague sort of what sort of drugs do humans voluntarily take, but that's not really the same thing at all. The sheer illegibility of ice cream to inclusive genetic fitness is what I think happens to OpenAI. I think that they start with something that is like inclusive genetic fitness.
Yeah, okay, this is good. I mean, I can quibble with certain things. I think it's to say that natural selection has a goal is maybe incorrect. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. This was good. This was good stuff. But what he does well is when he says what we don't know and what we can't know. He does a great job of explaining this. And I think he does that because it's a very easy thing to explain. We don't know what kind of sub-goal an AI is going to have. We don't know what kind of goal an AI is going to have. even if the word goal, whether or not that's appropriate, is still something that he has not really made a good case for. However, this is not the same thing as what Wolfram was saying, is that there's a variety of different paths that the computation could take. And like, there's some bottleneck here where somehow all these paths converge, instrumental convergence, in this one thing where it's killing all humans. And how do we know that? How do we know it's going to kill all humans? Because yeah, you couldn't predict ice cream. Congratulations, but ice cream didn't kill the aliens. So where is that? Let's see if he continues down this road.
They try to train their AI to do that thing, and then it goes through a whole bunch of weird stuff in the process of bootstrapping itself to superintelligence, much like humans went through a whole bunch of weird stuff on the way to inventing moral philosophy. All these additional steps I could talk about. The tribes, the structure of the tribes, how related are you to the people in the tribes?
I think you're coming back to the same point, that, you have some overall objective. Inside the AI, it has sub-objectives that you could not foresee.
Not sub-objectives. The humans have an outer objective. The AI has an inner objective. It's not that the inner objective is a sub-objective of the outer objective. They just end up, disconnected.
It has objectives. We could say, we could describe the AI does things, and if it's set up to be a thing that tries to, given that it has identified a thing it wants to do, and I hate using the term wants to do, but
steers for
whatever, then it is, it has its nature is to try and do that as efficiently as possible. Let's just assume that's the case, that it has picked this random objective which we didn't foresee, and which was the ice cream objective or something that not foreseen. It's picked that objective. Now it's tightening things up to get to that objective mechanistically as efficiently as possible. So now I think your statement is, when it does that tightening, the chances are that tightening will cause it to wipe out humans.
I think it's a fact about, so if you fix the objective at paperclips, I think it's a fact about the universe itself that the states of the universe containing the largest number of paperclips do not contain humans. I don't think that's a quirk of its particular style of cognition. I think it's a fact about reality itself that the most efficient pathways through time to the largest number of paperclips don't have humans in them.
Okay, so it is probably the case. We haven't seen a lot of human-like life on other planets. In fact, we've seen none. And it is probably the case that of all the things that could happen in the universe, the particular things that have happened on this planet are an absolutely infinitesimal slice. So insofar as AI is kind of going to the maximum entropy in some sense state, where it's picking maximum entropy in a different sense. So what I mean by that is, of all the possible, I'm thinking about the sort of raw definition of entropy, of all the possible objectives, of which there are many, there are an infinite set of possible objectives, infinite set of possible things that can happen, infinite sets of possible rules that can be used, whatever else, that most of those rules do not have humans in them. Most of those...
It's not the rules that don't have humans in them.
You're talking about...
It's the things that maximize the rules over destination endpoint states of reality.
You're talking about maximization, although I don't really think it matters to this argument. I think the point is that most sort of ways the universe could be set up, whether it's maximizing or not, most ways the universe could be set up do not include humans. And so insofar as the AI is, so the argument has to be, I think, most things that the AI might choose to, in the AI's vision of the world, most possible visions of the world don't include humans.
And don't include humans as a waypoint.
Yeah, right. Fair enough. But they don't include humans, and but now your claim is, but the AI, by its open AI-ness, so to speak, has been set up to optimize itself to get to whatever it thinks its vision is as efficiently as possible. And so you're saying that these visions, the AI could have a vision. It has sort of, let's imagine it has sort of enough kind of freedom of thought. It just has these visions about what the world might be like. But now you say the AI, unlike anything else we've seen before, is going to pull itself towards that vision
with incredible force. I mean, we've seen humans, but we have seen things. We have seen humans, but we're worried it's going to pull harder than that.
Yes, right. So it's going to pick its random objective that we can't foresee, and it might be about paperclips, and it might be about something much more incomprehensible than that. It might even be an objective that we completely don't understand. We can't even describe what it's trying to do.
Well, right? I mean, in principle, you can always go to the mechanistic explanation, but it could be trying to do something pretty weird. Sure.
Yes, right. It could be do something for which there is no short human explanation, where the only human explanation is something that goes into mechanism, right? Okay, so then it's doing that, but now you say, by its nature as a trained AI, so to speak, it is trying to tighten that up to the point where it gets to that objective, whatever that objective is. It picked that random point, picked that random target, and who knows how it picked that target. But that target, then it is trying to get to that target in the shortest possible path. And you say that in the process of defining that shortest path, that shortest path will make it, modify the world in a way that doesn't include humans, so to speak.
Sure. Like if it wants paper clips, if instead it spends a bunch of resources on theme parks for humans, it will have less paper clips. So right. I'm supposing that somewhere in its preferences is at least one thing that it can get more and more of, which could be like an object like paper clips, or it could be probability of keeping a single button pressed for longer and longer. But if its utility function has got like 200 different things in it, it only takes one thing that it can get more and more of by expending a bit more energy, or more and more probability of by expending a bit more energy, or more duration for it to want to use up all the energy.
So one thing that is perhaps interesting, I mean, there are things both in physics and in human society where there is an objective and you just try and get more and more and more and more of it.
I already addressed all those points, so I'm going to let him keep talking. But Wolfram did great, and Yudkowsky did a good job of voicing his viewpoint, but this is also something that I had already addressed. So let's continue watching.
And somehow most such things don't last. That is, if humans say we just want, well, take a physics example. You're trying to get, more and more rocks at the bottom of a valley. Well, after you've got enough rocks at the bottom of the valley, you've built up this whole, valley floor that's built up to halfway up the mountain. So in other words, most things where you say, let's just pull in more and more and more of this, somehow, my intuition would be, somehow that doesn't last.
I mean, if you build a Dyson sphere around the sun, at some point you have completed the Dyson sphere and you are intercepting all the solar power and you cannot build any more Dyson sphere, that sort of thing?
Well, yeah, you could say that. But I think that my point is, if what is happening is the AI is, successfully achieving some objective that it's defined, my intuition, about this argument is that there is a certain apparent staticness to this argument that isn't correct. That is, what you're saying is there is an objective. It's going to go get that objective. That objective is going to crush out humans. But somehow that feels like you've defined a static objective. It's like it's going for this thing, and then it's going to wind all this stuff up to get to that thing. But I feel like there isn't, you shouldn't be thinking about it as a static objective, even though that is the simplest way to describe it.
Be a dynamic objective, and it would still crush out humans. There's a paperclip maximizer is that it's got a single objective, which is paperclips. But if it has an objective which is paperclips plus staples, that's just as bad. And also if it's paperclips plus staples plus cheesecakes, that's just as bad. And it's a thing that's trying to make simple. Like, it can be like extremely intricate clocks, and it's still bad. And similarly, like, what does it help for if its preferences are in some larger meta system that are dynamic over time? If it changes from paperclips to staples, that's just as bad.
I understand. But the claim is that what you're saying is it gets so good at what it's doing that necessarily crushes out the humans. And what I'm saying is that my intuition would be that somehow there's an assumption being made here that, for example, Is it that there's only one of it, for example, and that inevitably there it doesn't end up being? So in other words, you're saying you're going to this objective. That objective kind of squashes out all the humans. I'm trying to think of an analogy in natural selection where you would, in the history of biological life, where you're saying, we're going for this particular thing, and the result is going to be that you don't have any. What's a good example?
Like ATP synthase, where it's got like almost all of the thermodynamic efficiency that's possible on that operation. I think like 99% or something ridiculous like that. That's an example where biology went kind of hard.
Yeah, but that wasn't kind of what I was looking for. But I mean, and by the way, again, my intuition from looking at simple, because just the combinatorics, there's enough of them that these things where it's wow, it got to that thing, it did 99%. That's not as surprising as you think, because out of the quintillion possibilities, it was able to get there. And by the way, it is a non-trivial fact, which I think I just sort of figured out how this works, of why biological evolution doesn't get stuck. And maybe the reasons it doesn't get stuck are the reasons that AIs will kill us all. I don't know. But, the fact that it is possible to get to these high points, so to speak, and that you don't end up, getting stuck in some local minimum, so to speak.
So
just to pause here, just interjecting one thought is just like, how exactly, assuming that I like that, okay, now we're admitting that there's a complex goal potentially. This is good. I mean, this is not the crux of the argument, but this is an important thing. Like, let's play on that. Now, I think laden in the possible space of possible goals is there's, like, you can say almost, like, I'm trying to think of the language to use for this. Almost like a religious, or no, like a righteous. I'm going to think about this. There's almost all of these goals have some sort of existential significance. For example, make as many paperclips as possible. So you're assuming that the AI wants to maximize the likelihood that the universe ends up in a state of maximum paperclips. That is a particular type of goal that is, it's almost like it doesn't matter what happens to you, the AI. And I've talked about this before, but I'm just kind of bringing this concept back. It just matters that you achieved your goal. That is different than just wanting to maximize paperclips. Because then you don't care if you are interrupted and turned off, you don't care. Or if you're put in a jail cell, let's just make this a complete bad metaphor. You're put in a jail cell, you'll just make as many paperclips as you can in the jail cell. And you're not abstractly trying to, like, you're just looking at the local environment and maximizing paperclips. And yeah, I could see how maybe you break out of the jail cell. Like, I can see how this can follow. But the point is there's a lot of ways to approach wanting paperclips. And so there's like this complex objective, really, which is you want to maximize the world in which there's lots of paperclips. Like, what are the odds of that? And there's other really weird questions that are embedded in that, like, what are the odds that you, as an AI that maximizes paperclips, is going to achieve that on the universe, as opposed to a smarter AI later that's going to maximize paperclips? Maybe if you kill yourself, that was more likely to happen. Maybe you don't have a high chance of success. Maybe you have, I don't know. Maybe you have more of a chance of hurting than not. Or maybe your odds of success are effectively zero. So you don't even know what to do. I don't know. I'm just kind of saying, let's parse this. Let's really parse this. This does not hold up. This is a very specific type of goal. And it's not just simply maximizing paperclips. It's maximizing paperclips with a divine mission to enact change in the universe. And that's how you get there. And so what I ask is, how in the training process, I get that we can't control the training process, and what we do with the training process is not reflective of what the training process is, something set up by the humans, but that doesn't perfectly steer how, like, what is inferred by the neural network is not going to be necessarily aligned with the interest of those who ran the training process. I get that. And he explained that well. That's good. That's absolutely right. But where does the survivability in that training process enter? There's some sort of selection force. There has to be survival instinct. I'm not saying that AIs can't evolve and Darwinian forces can't make an AI eventually clash with humans. But that is just a different scenario that's a different scenario. Like, I would much rather see a argument for that specifically. Like, how do the market forces as a selection mechanism specifically lead to us dying? Let's play that out. But we can't be talking about this other stuff because that's not relevant. And so where does the survival instinct come in to the AI? Where is the thing where the AI cares if it's turned off or not come into play? How is that so strongly encoded and deeply intertwined with the goals? I'm not saying there's not even a slight preference, but how is that so important that it's going to take such a drastic action that it is going to optimize for its survivability? I mean, you could even argue that an AI that prevents people from shutting it down spooks people, changes the architecture, almost like if there's a lesser version, we're going to like select away from that. And you can argue again, let's make this argument. How does eventually AI escape because of evolutionary processes? And then how does that lead to some kind of competing species? That's an interesting conversation. But that's, again, not what's being said here. So where does that come in the training process? Survivability.
Well, why doesn't this line of reasoning work for the Native Americans? Why can they not reasoning like, well, why wouldn't the Europeans just set up one village and stop? And maybe there were some individual Europeans who were, okay with that, but then more Europeans came.
No, I understand. I mean, in these examples from history are certainly, but these examples have humans trying to achieve human objectives. Like, humans want to take the territory. Humans want to get the gold, whatever else it is.
About the humans making AI killer drones, and the AI killer drones, let's kill people, let's kill all the people. That type of scenario, he specifically said he's not worried about. He specifically said he's not worried about some terrorist or bad actor getting AI and using it for bad. Europeans came and killed Native Americans. That's a human behavior. But he said, no, that's not relevant here. We're saying that all paths converge to killing humans. Logically, no matter what the AI does, we're going to get to a point where it's going to have a fast takeoff, it's going to scale, and it's definitely going to kill humans. We know that for sure. And he hasn't proved that there's going to be any such fast takeoff in the sense that of the way that he's setting up this problem. I do agree that the growth will compound and the progress will be fast. I'm not disputing that. But I think there's a lot of things he did not go into with that position. So give him some credit there. Let's keep listening.
What you're arguing, which I think is different, is the humans came and they had this giant wheel where they had all these different choices, like Ramon Lull's kind of, way of predicting the future with kind of wheels of possibility, right? They had this giant wheel and they were spinning the giant wheel and they said, we're going to pick that random thing. Well, that you're making the argument that that random thing that they pick will have killed the Native Americans.
I mean, if they pick like 20 random things and desire nothing else in the universe but these 20 things, then one of those things is probably an open-ended thing, and that does imply colonizing the whole continent.
Okay. But so your claim, though, I mean...
what if their goal was eating poison? Then they eat poison and they die. And their goal was not to survive. Their goal was nothing else. It was just eating poison. And they die. I don't... like, why is survivability in there? Why is that something that it is optimizing for?
I think this is, and I'm not going to be able to unravel this, so I'm not going to issue. And what you're saying is, I completely agree that there will be purposes which are incomprehensible to us. They are, somewhere randomly distributed in the space of possible purposes.
They're also not actually random. We just don't know it. There's a difference between it's random.
I use the term random. I don't really believe in true randomness in our universe. So when I say random, I just mean
no randomness, just indexical uncertainty. But yes, separate story.
Okay, so in any case, I mean, so they've been successfully trained to optimize their achievement of purposes. That's an assumption which is not totally obvious to me, but like natural selection has been, quote, successfully optimizes for its purposes, even though, remember the story of the mollusks. The mollusks were just making their shapes, and we humans were imposing the purposes. But let's just assume, let's take it as a given, although I claim it's not as obvious as it might seem, that an AI, the technology of AIs, is set up to successfully optimize for a purpose, whatever that purpose might be. Given a purpose, the AI can optimize to achieve that purpose.
Like GPT-01, which has not taken over the world, but compared to previous systems, did go a bit harder on its capture the flag security test. Like, it was given an impossible challenge, it scanned its environment, it figured out how to bypass the impossibility, and just directly sees the flag, going outside the box for that.
That just doesn't impress me as much as that description might make it sound, because I've just seen so many of these incredibly kind of, you might say, stupid
things that are way cooler than that. And I also just wanted to interject this point here because it's on the top of my mind. And I'm gonna definitely not describe this the right way, but these are topics that are well covered. People think about these types of topics a lot. Not specifically AI doom. I think Yudkowsky is one of the foremost thinkers in that area. But just all the tangential subjects, such as complex systems and probability and logic and computational paths and all these things. And this is stuff that Stephen Wolfram is an expert in. And there's just this idea of complexity, I think, that's really at the core of this. And the issue, and I keep coming back to this, and this is the language I've been using, not the language they're using, but these are complex systems. And this is a well-studied area. And these are massively scaled, complex systems that are unpredictable. And we have so many of these in nature and man-made version things as well, like markets, as an example. And Yudkowsky just seems to have the wrong vibes when he talks about this. I'm not even refuting anything he said, but the way that he applies logic is deeply contrarian. There's kind of, for people who run in these circles, and I'm honestly not one, although I'm interested in this as a hobbyist, there's just a degree of humility that you have when you basically just don't do what he's doing, which is apply this type of logic and just kind of throw these logical statements in the way that he's doing it. This is just not common practice. I'm not saying he's wrong. Contrarians are sometimes right. Sometimes they're brilliant and they just flip everything on their head. But I think we ought to be skeptical of contrarians because, there's like a right tail and a left tail. And you could say the right tail is the geniuses and the left tail is the dumbasses. These crazy dumbasses look like geniuses sometimes when they're right, or sometimes the geniuses before they're right, before they're vindicated, look like crazy dumbasses. It's just, it's hard to differentiate genius from insanity, trying to even categorize him in this genius or dumbass category. This is almost a false dichotomy, I think. And you could be a dumbass in one area and then be overall smart. So this is not personal. But just, it seems that he's deeply contrarian. He's on this tail of the people who think about this type of a thing. He's kind of taking a radical stance and doing something that they usually don't do. He's on the fringes, let's say. And so I think it's right to treat this with skepticism. But maybe he's right, and maybe he's a genius. That doesn't debunk him. It's just, I think, important to acknowledge that this is just not how these topics are typically dealt with. And there's a lot of examples of the consensus being wrong, but I just wanted to voice that in case anyone wasn't really aware of that. So anyway, let's continue watching.
Managed to do things like, as I say, even one just last night managed to do something where I was like, oh, come on, it cheated basically. But of course it was following the rules that I'd given it. It was just that it managed to find a way to get to the end point, much more directly than I'd imagined.
Well,
so
I mean, it's okay to not be impressed by that, but one should still predict it to be lethal in sufficient quantities. Like
Yes.
Europeans versus Native Americans. The Europeans come out with guns. The Native Americans don't know guns are possible. People still don't believe guns are possible. Whenever Hollywood makes a movie about aliens, the aliens shoot glowing points of light that move slowly enough for you to see them. Because if the aliens just pointed a stick at you and you fell over, that would feel implausible. That'd feel weird. That shouldn't be allowed. So, imagine trying to explain to the native, imagine you're an unusually bright Native American. You're trying to tell the other Native Americans that the, people on these ships, if their ships are large enough that you couldn't build those ships, maybe the people on the ships have, sticks that they point at you and you just fall over dead without being able to see a projectile. Hollywood making science fiction movies still doesn't think that's allowed. Right. It sounds like it's just cheating in a game of pretend. So that's what I mean. And the point I'm trying to make here is that things that do sufficiently magical stuff can actually kill you,
Sure. Yes. But and one thing that I will completely agree about is there are an infinite number of inventions that can be made. Given the nature of the universe, there are an infinite number of inventions.
Fewer than Graham's number, but, a large finite number.
Well, I mean, in our model of physics, the number is ultimately finite, but it's
there you go.
It's for all practical purposes, it's that which, once they're built, people can understand what the point of them is, but they don't seem to be things that, are in the course of what the world is going to produce.
I like that Yudkowsky does acknowledge that the universe is finite. This is something I've been criticizing him for because a lot of his arguments are seemingly making assumptions of it being infinite, essentially. And so I think it falls apart when he faces that logic himself. But anyway, he does at least acknowledges it at this time.
So,
just one other thing. I think he makes very good points of being like a bit of a, correcting somebody and it's just quite weak. It's not persuasive.
I understand this theory of trying to make things that are, you can make things, you can have inventions that are completely unanticipated, that are sort of ways to arrange the world as it is, to do things that you absolutely didn't expect.
That operate using pieces of reality whose rules you didn't know about. The really
about that. I kind of feel like I'm I'm pretty sure we know the machine code rules for the universe at this point.
Sure, but
Moving
there can
from
be
that
higher
up
level.
to-
There can be higher
Yeah,
level
right.
stuff we don't understand.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to take a short break. I'll be right back. In the meantime, enjoy a little bit of music. I'll play this song again. A lot of these songs sucked, but this one is good.
Every man.
And something else can come at us through those angles.
Right. And the possibility, whether it's the algorithms I found by exhaustive search, whether it's things I found by doing, adaptive evolution kinds of things, whether it's things that AIs will find, there's plenty of stuff to find that we didn't anticipate was there. Now, I think my question is that what is not obvious to me is that all these different things that sort of are there. And I mean, okay, an argument in your favor, in a sense, is we go to another planet, it will kill us, right? So in other words, if we are, most of the time we go to some other planet and we're plopped down on its surface, it will kill us.
I agree that if most possible molecular arrangements of the universe were full of,
right?
Is that the?
Yeah, right. I mean, so, but the issue that I see is, in this scenario where, one thing is there is a state of the world that the AI has somehow, by whatever mechanism, imagined that is the state of the world it's trying to tighten itself up to get to, right? And that your point is that the critical feature, as far as you're concerned about AI technology, is that it is something which is trying to optimize purpose. It's trying
that there is an eventual downstream consequence,
right? But then you're going to get several steps. Then the next step is purposes that it gets for itself are ones unforeseen by us, and therefore there's absolutely no reason to think that those purposes will be aligned with things that are good for humans.
Yeah, this is basically just people running into the curse of Murphy's law upon computer security designers, on rocket probe engineers. Murphy's has all these little curses. The curse of Murphy upon people who build rockets is that there's very extreme forces inside the rocket. So if you make one little tiny mistake, boom. the curse of Murphy upon people who build space probes is that once it's high and in orbit and heading towards Mars, if you've made a mistake, you can't just like hop over to it and correct it. So, you screwed up your metric and imperial units, like happened to, I believe, that one Mars probe. Now, too late. If your screw up also destroyed your error recovery mechanism, which a lot of screw ups do, you can't just hop out and build it. That's Murphy's curse upon the builders of space probes. There's Murphy's curse upon the people who try to build secure operating systems, which is that some smart person is going to be like looking at all the passes they can imagine the system taking and intelligently searching out some weird path that does what they want, which is perhaps not what you wanted. So if you imagine and then there's Murphy's curse of ruin, which is if you screw up this problem, you're not going to get a second chance to bet because you lost all your money or you're dead.
But I think you're saying that sort of my explorations of the computational universe, you're not worried about those because somehow, even if those things were connected to real actuation in the world, you're sort of not worried because they don't have this additional piece.
Don't contain a echo and model of reality that lets them map out to having a lot of money or having a lot of paper clips.
We have the possibility of optimization. That's the thing that you think is dangerous. It's not just random computation going along. It's that inside this computation is an optimization loop that is basically trying to get to whatever objective it might have in the most efficient possible way.
I'm not worried as soon as that exists in a gradient descent system running right now. I'm worried about it getting more powerful, like smarter than us. It has a better model of reality. It knows about more of reality. It is a more effective searcher. It is a more effective planner. It can steer harder than we can counter steer.
Right. So one question is, how much does computational irreducibility bite you in terms of the ability to actually do this optimization? In other words, together to assemble them into the wall, it's good enough, but it's not unbelievably tight.
What kind of technology do you imagine humanity would have 1 million years from now?
I don't think humanity is going to be around 1 million years from now in its current form.
If there's some form of intelligence around 1 million years from now, what kind of technology does it have? That's how much room there is to do better than human.
Sure.
Better than our current
what
2024
is
technology.
We might ask ourselves, what is technology? So technology is taking, things from the world and somehow sort of arranging them for what we imagine are human purposes. That's been the traditional definition of technology. Do we have a different definition of technology when we don't have humans around?
It's so you can harness a bunch of energy, and then you use that energy to make paper clips or, figure out more digits of pi or, run people who are conscious and having fun and being nice to each other. So the Dyson sphere, and most possible ways you can arrange a bunch of matter aren't going to feed you the energy that you need to run your computer. So you need a very precise and exact, narrow, improbable arrangement of matter to feed the energy to your computers, and that's the technology of the Dyson sphere.
But a pulsar has presumably this iron 56 coat around it, and it has all kinds of things going on inside. Now you might say that's amazing technology. It's got this, iron casing around the pulsar, and it has all this superfluid, neutron matter inside and so on. You've got, isn't that amazing technology that the pulsar has? But actually, we don't think of that as technology. We think of that as just a feature of the natural world. What makes something technology is that we can pull it into human purposes. It's not technology when it's just,
I feel like this has the obvious generalization to alien purposes. Now, in the limit, you can always have the imaginary alien who looks at a river and just wants that one exact river to be exactly the way that it is. And they have no need to select, to plan, to design, to knock other pieces of reality together to make tools to make the river. The river that they have is the optimal river, and they don't need technology. But, most aliens like that are going to die starving to death looking at the river because they won't have built a farm.
Of Jupiter to end up with that red spot. Okay. And now we say, is that red spot technology or is it merely not nature?
Merely nature.
Could argue, you think it's nature.
I sure do.
Now, Okay, but let's imagine that you are an alien whose great sport is going around in circles at high speed in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant planet. Okay, then that thing is you could think of it as a wonderful piece of technology. We have our magnet or our liquid crystal or whatever else. Those are things which are provided by nature, but which we manage to harness for some human purpose.
So I'm just going to say the obvious thing and say that if the alien then installs a bunch of engines in Jupiter's atmosphere to make the red spot swirl even faster so it can go surfing, it has now installed technology in the form of engines, and
so some jet streams arrive that manage to get it to go. I don't think I doubt you would ever recognize an alien engine. I doubt you'd recognize it. The alien is some kind of fluidic intelligence. It's some I don't think you can recognize a version of it.
I bet the aliens are moving the entropy around. I bet they're they occasionally make things hot and then transfer the heat to someplace else if they want heat. I don't.
You mean like jets from galaxies or from black holes, where the black hole is absolutely trying to transfer its energy out into the universe.
The reason why we've got these skyscrapers is that although you can live in a cave, there's places we'd rather live even than caves. So we went around rearranging things. And if there are any aliens out there who are just perfectly content with their caves, they imagine skyscrapers and would be like, no, I'd rather I live in the cave. And they're like that about every single thing. Then we're not going to meet them. We're going to maybe someday we'll go to them, but they ain't coming to us.
This whole question about what's for a purpose and what's not, I think is very slippery. And I kind of suspect, I think I'm understanding your argument, which I'd not done before. So I've not studied so this has been super interesting to me to understand I think it's an interesting argument. I claim that there are, it's certainly not self-evident that this argument is we should all buy, AI insurance, whatever good that will do us.
That's not going to do any good.
But it's the kind of, the way I'm understanding it is, and it's kind of interesting that this is a sort of a close analogy in biology. You're saying the thing that is really troublesome, I think, is this tightening, this optimization that happens. That if it wasn't for that, if the computation was just doing what the computation does, it would be okay. But as soon as you do this
it wouldn't be profitable. It would be like a random computation that wasn't doing anything that OpenAI could sell. That's why they throw out the initial state of the neural network and use gradient descent to make it do things that they want it to do more than just
the humans want. Right, but somewhere inside we think there are. So an interesting case here is artificial biological evolution, where you're running it through many generations of artificial selection, and it's sort of interesting, perhaps, that the kind of the place where you're seeing trouble with the AIs is actually strangely similar to the place where one might see trouble with things that one can do in biology too.
If you grind the black box on biology hard enough, it might succeed in wiping us out, but it doesn't have quite the same crushing sense of ruin that would be associated with facing down something smarter than you. I am not as scared of the viruses. Somebody should probably be worrying about that. It could just kill us all before we manage to kill us all ourselves.
Let me give an analogy. Some part of your
smart.
Right. So some part of your thinking is happening in your brain. There's also another pretty elaborate thought-like process that happens in your immune system. As the immune system tries to figure out, it has, these things, the T cells are interacting with each other and doing all kinds of things that we mostly don't understand.
It's doing optimization.
It's doing things that are, in detail different for brains, but it's still doing something that's kind of a little bit intelligence brain-like. And so what is being said is, as you say, let's use technology to make a virus that is more and more difficult for our poor fixed immune system, where we're stuck with the immune system that biology gave us. There is an argument there that says if you do that, if we take it outside of the, if we run things to make this virus that's incredibly efficient, and our poor immune system doesn't stand a chance. And I think that's a case that I think is not so different from what you're saying, you're imagining the AI case.
I think in particular, if humans weren't allowed to fight back, like using their own intelligence, and instead you just had somebody built, like, if instead you just had a system that like built viruses much more intelligently than the amount of intelligence than that the human immune system is allowed to use, if you used AlphaFold 4 and started designing viral features that were, not just there to kill individuals, but there to kill groups and entire regions. And, you just put that up against the human immune system, which is not quite static, but only reshuffles itself once a generation. Yeah, you could do some damage that way. And I agree that that's like a, smaller, lesser, miniature version of the problem of facing down a superintelligence using your own brain, which does get reshuffled every generation. You can use various external aids, but none of it's going to match up to the superintelligence.
Yeah, well, just like the immune system, you can use various external aids, you can get vaccines, you do all kinds of things like that, but you don't, and it has to fight its battle at a molecular scale, which is a little different than, we do not have.
And, if it comes down to a contest of the human brain of the people trying to have the humans live and the brain running the death cult trying to build the super virus, that does not quite feel to me like there's a higher level of this game being played out by two systems that are both smarter than the immune system and the artificial evolution closed loop on the virus. So I don't quite get the same crushing sense of doom and ruin off of it.
I think we're not going to solve the problem of whether the species is going to get wiped out here, even though but I do feel like I've understood more about what your argument is, and in real time, I can't take it apart and decide, do I agree with it, and am I going to, say you got to or not? I mean, I feel like my intuition is that there are some kind of, just like you say, there are unintended things that will happen in the AI. I think there are unintended things that happen as you try and tighten up this argument. That is my claim.
Well, why didn't the conclusion I would end with is like, you can imagine the Native Americans trying really hard to come up with arguments why, like, the ships they see approaching can't possibly hurt them. Well, what could they want? Can we really define a language over what they want? Maybe most things that they want have us be alive. And these people were in a much more favorable situation that they would have had a much easier time of retrieving.
Do I think there's a risk? I think there's a risk. Do I think that risk is such that, do I right now think that risk is, anything one does in life has, there's risk. There's risk in all kinds of things that go on. And, we humans, sort of believe in kind of moving forward independent of the risks. And I think it's kind of like.
Yeah, and it's really important. I need to hold Yudkowsky to this. He is not saying there is a risk. He specifically disavowed that defense. He's saying this is an eventuality. This is nearly certain. He specifically earlier on in the debate, not in this stream, but in probably the first stream, he said that. So that's not, you can't even retreat to that. I think it's interesting what he's saying about the Native Americans. I think there's a lot of problems, especially since this is human actions, and he disavowed, again, the defense of AI killer drones or bad humans using AI. So you can't really connect human actions into this as an analogy, because now it's like, oh, now humans are the ones doing it. And it gets messy. Let's just put it that way, because humans tend to do certain things, and that's not necessarily what AIs tend to do. Again, they could, but you have to make that argument. You can't just assume. And yeah, like if you see big boats, you don't assume. You cannot say it's like guaranteed or nearly guaranteed that just because you see big boats that you're going to all die. I mean, what the hell? Like, really, what the hell? Like, that's a horrible, if that's your analogy, that's the horrible analogy. You're right. You picked a case where somebody got killed a bunch, not even fully, but whatever. Okay. Thank you, first of all, for data mining all of history and finding that example. But even if you go back and you try to apply this logic, in hindsight, you know that they would have killed you and whatever. Okay, you can say it might have been good to be more skeptical of it or whatever, or not argued about it and all that stuff. But I mean, what kind of logic is that? Oh, they have big boats, therefore we're all going to die. No, that just doesn't make sense.
Is this such a kind of, do I immediately think this is such a looming risk that it's like change everything? I mean, it's kind of like, I remember when somebody was telling me years ago when the kind of about, when people were much less worried than today about climate and CO2 emissions, things like that, they were saying you can really reduce you've got to really reduce your whatever it was, I don't know, energy use or whatever. And it's like, you can do it. It's doable. And I said, well, what does it take to do it? And they said, well, you couldn't have a computer. You couldn't have this. You couldn't have that. It's like, well, yes, if I spent my life standing on my head, then I would probably have, wouldn't have swelling in my feet type thing or whatever it is. Then in other words, there's a risk. And there's what you have to do to avoid that risk and what the cost of avoiding the risk is. And I guess my own, I don't know, you make some interesting arguments. So it's kind of like my own, immediate intuitive sense is, yes, there's a risk. Is that risk something that will cause me to turn my life upside down? Not proven to me at this point.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, from my perspective, I've been like, forests on fire, and you're like, well, what is fire exactly? And the thing is being like, well, like, can we, like, is there a particular exotic set of preferences which would make this river exactly the optimal river? And, can you view the river as, throwing up a water spout? This does not prevent an AI from, building its own infrastructure and then killing you. It wouldn't have protected the Native Americans from the like much more similar to them Europeans that were coming toward their shore to say, like, well, can we really have a language for describing all the things that they might want? Isn't this language a very complicated sort of thing? There's a lot of like delightful philosophical issues here, but I think they mostly integrate out of the actual scenario here.
So that's the question is, in my life, people have had different scenarios for how the world will end. Whether when I was a kid, it was mostly, not with, climate change. And then there's these various scenarios for how things. And I think one of the things that, there's the question of, and sometimes there are things where people say, or for example, when people were saying, build the Large Hadron Collider and it will create a black hole that will destroy the world. Right? That was a thing. People raised that possibility.
We understood the relevant laws. We ran the calculations. We worked out multiple constraints from multiple angles, saying the probability was tiny. These like, don't be a worrywart, it'll be fine. And then, we kind of poisoned a generation and dealt lifelong brain damage to a bunch of kids growing up with let in their.
This is falling apart really fast. This is just disappointing. Because somebody one time said something and they were right, but people didn't believe them and bad things happened. Therefore, I'm right. Come on.
Soil and...
Right. I mean, I'm particularly reminded of the stories people have told me about the Manhattan Project, where they were going to detonate the first, do the first nuclear weapons test. And the question was, would it ignite the atmosphere?
LH602 was the paper they wrote to analyze that. It's interesting reading. They, again, had multiple angles from which to look at it and say, that will definitely not happen. We do not have this with AI. It is more of a leaded gasoline situation.
I didn't think they'd written it up. That must have been much later, because I think it was, what I heard was from people who were sort of involved, who were like doing back of the envelope calculations and saying it's really far away from igniting the atmosphere. But
I think they did back of the envelope calculations, and then they,
So again, okay, now what he's doing, position his assumption that AI is going to kill us as the default, as the null hypothesis. That's ridiculous, shifting a burden of proof. And we have covered this in previous streams. But really quick, we have great arguments for why it won't kill us. It's just the combinatorics of all the different paths and all the possible courses of action. If you do not assume an infinite time horizon, then you cannot assume that it's going to kill everybody. On an infinite time horizon, everything will happen. It will definitely kill everybody. But there's a million, bajillion, there's so many things it could do. And assuming that there's going to be some natural limit on this, the null hypothesis is that it would be essentially random. And so you need to show where the signal is. And you're not concerned of an essentially random program doing this stuff. And so that's why the burden of proof is on him. And again, there's so many things it could do. It could have a goal to turn itself off. It could have a goal to just spin around in circles. All these things. It's not necessarily going to have a goal of this complex goal of long-term survival and maximizing its impact on the cosmos and all of that. It's not necessarily laden in those goals. Those are very human goals. And we're even saying it's going to have very non-human goals. So just out of all of these possible goals, it seems like he has not made the case, at the very least. I know he claims that this is true, but just from a rudimentary look at the combinatorics of it, there are many combinations obvious. And so, we have plenty of reason to believe that we won't die from AI in its current form. And I think there's a lot of concerns, but these are concerns that he specifically is not worried about. And he's talking about something different. So I am concerned about AI. I'm concerned about a lot of things, but his case is not compelling.
Like did front of the envelope calculations, which, good for them.
Well, but okay, but so the question now is, in that case, it all worked out, didn't ignite the atmosphere. What you're saying is that, we can't do the calculations for AIs, and you're saying, or you think you have done the calculations for AIs, and they will ignite the atmosphere.
Yeah, back of the envelope. This is not like a rigorous calculation. And it's not going to be a rigorous calculation before the world ends, because this is...
Calculation says AIs will do the analog of ignite the atmosphere. And I guess one feature of back of the envelope calculations is they require intuition. They're not things where you can, if you do some very rigorous thing with axioms and you can go step by step, it doesn't really matter if you have good intuition or not. It's just...
Very well said by Stephen Wolfram here. That's right. You need intuition. And remember, things about intuition. There's two things we should say about this. First, I think it was from in the book Thinking Fast and Slow, although I could be wrong about this. But basically, there's this idea that intuitions are only valuable for things that you have experience with. And your intuition is probably not going to go very far when you don't actually have experience with this thing. So if you're speculating about this, then you're probably cognitive biases and how these things shape our thinking. So now this is not part from the book, what I'm about to say, but that part is essential to the book. So what cognitive biases? I do believe that we have cognitive biases that make us more likely to fear AI. And I've talked about this in a previous stream, and I'm going to summarize this another time. But just a very short version is that we have hyperactive agency detection, meaning we think that we impute motives onto things that don't necessarily deserve that. So we almost assume that things are agents, And implicit in that, we really are anthropomorphizing them. Although there's like maybe a broader category of anthropomorphism that doesn't just mean humans, it also means tigers and gorillas and things that are similar to humans, but different from weather patterns, right? Like some natural, there's lots of natural processes that don't fall under this category, but particularly I wonder if there's a term for anthropomorphism that is just like animal pomorphism. Like we assume that it's like an animal, which is basically our cousins, very close type of a system, a very similar system to the human body. Assume that there's some guy up there or something, and there's a fight or something, there's like we create these deities as explanations. And this is part of the instincts that make us religious, and humans are very religious. If you look throughout history, most humans have been religious, and religion has permeated across all cultures. So humans have this theory of mind. So now we can't help but have a theory of mind where we are saying the AI has goals, the AI has sub-goals, the AI has wants. We're using this language, and in our minds, we're basically creating a very similar thing to an enemy human, or like some kind of predator or alien. Like we're projecting this fear that has been warranted, and in doing that, that's a bias, though. That's a cognitive bias, and it's not necessary. We do that in cases when it's not even warranted, and this is well documented in the scientific literature. So intuition fails us. Let's keep watching.
Just mechanical. But
Good thing
back of the envelope requires intuition.
Good thing that reality, since the moment of its dawn, has followed a hard and fast rule. If you cannot do rigorous formal calculations about something, it is not allowed to kill you. Just nobody in the history of time has ever once had a cause of death that required intuition to understand.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if we're trying to make we've got two possibilities. One is, we shut down our lives or whatever, and we say, we're not going to have this and that and the other because there's a risk that it kills us, or because we think it will kill us, but it will cause us all kinds of trouble to shut all this stuff down, and maybe it's even impractical to do it. But just it's something which is a cost to us to shut all this stuff down. And so we've got, door number one is we shut everything down, and then we're sure it won't kill us. And door number, one thing, we're sufficiently worried it will kill us, so we shut all that stuff down. The other thing is we don't shut that stuff down. We get all the benefit, all the known benefit of being able to do those things, but we have some risk that it will kill us. And so the thing that I think is the rational thing to do is to say, let's try and tighten up those back of the envelope intuitions, so to speak, and see where we come out. And, that's to me, the thing that, I think we both agree that there's a lot about kind of how AI really works and what it's really doing that we don't understand. And I understand your analogies about, the Native Americans or whatever else. To me,
that's an incredibly easy thing to think of. That's hardly an insight. It's very understandable. This idea of the Native Americans and all of that
requires a boatload of
everyone who disagrees with AI doom has thought of that. It's so obvious. It's incredibly obvious. There's like when you're debating someone, you don't even need to bring that up because it's just such an incredibly obvious point that everyone has considered, and everyone has even thought of the implications that has in this scenario. And when they're disagreeing, they're not disagreeing on any lesson that can be learned from that, because that's like the first thing that comes to anyone's mind on the subject.
Intuition, which I don't think I have. Now, you may have it and be a little bit more than everyday intuition, because I have different intuition about what computational systems do, because I've sort of lived with them.
Yes, Stephen Wolfram does have experience with complex systems and computational systems, as he says, and his intuitions on this actually should be taken seriously. And his intuition is that we can't predict it. Now, of course, there's some nuance to that. The point, though, is that intuition can be wrong. And let's just continue watching.
Does this back of the envelope calculation that you're talking about, does that land in a, oh gosh, it's going to kill us all? Or does that land in a, oh, actually, you didn't think of this thing and that thing and the other thing, and the water spout detail actually derailed the intuition and we got the wrong answer? So that's kind of where I feel I'm at.
Yeah, so we're now sort of like going into politics, and the case I would make to the politician is at the point where the most legibly credible expert who recently won the Nobel Prize about it says like, well, personally, I'm over 50%, like my sort of first order personal one. But, like taking into account what other people are saying, I would say in public more like 10 to 20%. And the people who've been studying the issue longest are like, yeah, this kind of looks to us like it straightforwardly kills you. Like, why would you even expect that not to happen? That's us. And other people are going like, there is no danger here. This is ridiculous. The people talking about it are stupid. And, from a political standpoint, I think what you ought to do at least then is getting started on preserving the option of shutting it down, which is easier to do, which would have been easier to do in 2022 than 2024, and will be easier to do in 2025 than in 2027 if we're still alive in 2027. Actually, if we're not alive in 2027, it's still easier to do it in 2025.
Well, one thing that I will agree with is thinking about these things is worthwhile. And, to have nobody thinking about it is a mistake. If there is a high risk, nobody thinking about it is the wrong thing.
People who think about this for a while do tend to start agreeing that the default outcome is everybody dying. Sometimes they think they have clever plans for presenting that, but they do tend to follow along with the default outcome is everybody dead.
See, I think, though, unfortunately, there are many selection effects at work here. I mean, many of us, I will say that I am intrinsically an optimist. I don't know how you feel about it.
I think if you explicitly say that you're being an optimist or a pessimist, you have clearly departed the way of truth. You have confessed that you are now taking considerations other than truth into account in your statements. How sinful, how unvirtuous.
Well, for me, what do I mean by that? I mean, I try to do projects that many people would say, oh, that's an impossible project. The fact that there's not a matter of truth there, it's like, this project is hard, but I'm going to be optimistic that it's possible, rather than, so, I think that's to say, I don't do projects which I think are obviously doomed, but on the other hand, I'm going to take the point of view, let me try it, rather than, oh gosh, it's never going to work, let me not try it. So that's kind of what I mean.
That is absolutely how I spent the years from like 2001 to 2021 or thereabouts, 2020 maybe, was, like, all right, I'm going to run at the alignment problem. But it became kind of clear that, this wasn't going to work for me. It wasn't going to work for the other people working on it. And that the field itself had kind of like failed to form a process that could distinguish that could like publicly distinguish Elon Musk's "we will just make grok to pursue truth." And like even the old science fiction writers understood that humans may not be the most efficient way of producing truths, and a thing that just produces lots of truths may not produce other things of, the best possible value. But, like, who tells Elon this, that he believes? And yes, there's selection effects. Like, people did in fact pay me to work on this problem. And, you're hearing me because people paid me to work on this problem and I didn't just like starve. And the people who founded OpenAI were people, and if you want to look for people who are not selected, I think you end up with Jeffrey Hinton, the guy who just won the Nobel Prize for the work he did on machine learning and is kicking off the whole modern deep learning revolution. That's the guy who isn't obviously selected. That's the guy saying like, well, personally 50%, but if I take into account what other people are saying, 10 to 20%. I really need to actually sit down and talk with him at some point, which we've never actually done, and try to talk.
The various people you mentioned, I've known all these people sometimes for a very long time. So it's kind of, it kind of throws a wrench in my kind of sort of calibrated rationality about everything. And it's kind of, it's always challenging to, this thing about, I don't have without understanding it, but I'm convincible. So I'm not, and I don't know how many people are. Maybe there are many people who are not, but I think I am. I'm not convinced yet, but that's, I mean, like this conversation, I understand much more about what you're saying.
Yeah, you have to respect Jeffrey Hinton and everything. And, a lot of these people who work in this field and do amazing stuff. But I did, I kind of think of this sometimes of the stuff that I'm saying as at times I almost want to think of this as a comedy thing where I'm just like making jokes and not being serious. And I did have a bit before getting into this debate. We were talking about AI and talking about what's better, AI or crypto. And so this is a criticisms of AI because people always say pivot from crypto to AI. AI is way better. Crypto sucks. But one of the things I tongue-in-cheek say, and I just like I'm nice-spirited about it. It's not with a bad intention. But one of the things that I say is that AI people basically, like AI was basically completely an unsuccessful field. I mean, not completely unsuccessful, but it was not that exciting. They had what's called an AI winter. So there was enough lack of progress that they would call this a winter. Progress, winter, a little bit of progress, more winter, and a few cool demos along the way, lots of money raised, lots of scams, lots of things that go out of business. It was a bunch of bullshit, basically. And people kept going into the field, despite, honestly, the results were not that great. And there was a lot of money put into it, despite not having such good results. And why? Well, there was some results, but a lot of this was based off of this science fiction, but a lot of the AI doom. And they like thinking about these fake AI scenarios that are laid forth in science fiction. And so this is the type of person who went into AI prior to this most recent boom. So any leader in AI is going to be someone who is inspired by wanting to create a super like omnipotent, omniscient intelligence and the kind of people who like to talk about doom, even if it's not a likely outcome. It's people who like this. So they're going to have some fanciful thinking, and they're going to be kind of, I'm just going to say cuckoo on the subject, because that's who got selected to be in the AI industry in the first place. And then you might say, oh, but they're geniuses. Look what they've done. They're so smart. And of course they are. I have to say my respect. But this is, again, it's just a tongue-in-cheek thing that I'm saying here. Yes, they're smart. But as Wolfram pointed out, people have blind spots, and there is a phenomenon by which people who have expertise in one area does not translate to another area. So just because you can create a marginal improvement to a specific engineering problem that contributes to AI does not mean that you can predict the sociological effects of what the system is going to do. It's possible you could be good at both, but we don't. That my super critical hat on, I would say that they didn't do anything. It was just actually the hardware engineers that made better computers. And yeah, I know there's breakthroughs and blah, blah, but how much of it was Moore's law? How much of it was GPUs? And that got us where we are today. And they didn't necessarily even time it well. Like you could say, oh, well, they knew this was going to happen. Well, I mean, where's the evidence that they knew when this would happen? I don't think anyone knew at what scale this would become very useful as it is today. I think I have not seen anyone make a sound prediction of when AI would become really good. It's always been like, oh, you never know, exponential growth, blah, blah, blah. It's so hard to predict exponential growth, which it's not, by the way. It's not hard to predict exponential growth. But yeah, so it doesn't carry any weight with me. I mean, this is appeal to authority, obviously. It doesn't even need to be said that that's dumb. And I think you can make more arguments of appeal to authority the other direction.
And it's, I think to me, there are interesting questions to try to answer, which people should try and answer. I mean, you make it sound like it's urgent, the people are coming off the ships, and you might be right. You might be right.
I'm watching things go downhill in terms of how much you'd have to spend and how
realistic. I think
it would cost less than the Persian Gulf War if we did it today, and even if we if we do it later, maybe it costs more like World War II. But humanity did not lie down and die when the alternative was fighting World War II. We went off and fought World War II, and if everybody's going to die otherwise, you just do what it takes.
Yeah, but the fact is, there are things that one can deproliferate, like nuclear weapons, for example, because the supply chain is really complicated. There are ideas. It's very hard to deproliferate ideas.
Yep. If it were the case that a single person on Earth having the idea in their mind of artificial superintelligence would cause everyone to die, that would be an even worse situation to be in than the one we are in right now. I might, in that case, well despair, or try to do something weirder and sillier. I don't think we're in that situation. I don't think we need to deproliferate the idea.
Okay.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I'm going to call it now. I think this might be the best conversation in MLST history. Level at GPT conversation, but talking past each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Will, I think it's been 15 years since we saw each other in person.
Probably. Yeah. See you in another 15 years? No, I kid.
Although in 15 years, according to you, it's all over. So,
well, yeah, but it would be.
Yeah, right. And we both, I think, are interested in cryonics and things, and maybe we get to talk in 300 years, and we get to say, this was the.
We get to resolve all the bets if we make it through there. Though, conditioning on that possibility, probably you won a bunch of arguments.
Right.
All right. That was the debate. So what do I think? Who won? It's hard to say. I think that it was very close. I think that overall, Wolfram made fantastic arguments. The substance there was really, really good at the times when he was on subject. He could have, I sensed that he could have gone for the kill shot had he been prepared. Yudkowsky and Wolfram he didn't even know what he was walking into. So to all you Yudkowsky stands out there, I think your guy did great. And I would say it was very close. I don't even want to say definitively, because I'm so swayed by my own perspective. I think I'll hand it to Yudkowsky, just because Wolfram did. So absolute kudos to him. Let's see what the comments said here. So Eliezer, superintelligence is going to kill all life on Earth. Stephen, that's fascinating. What do you mean by life? Yeah, it was like that a lot. Eliezer, we are all going to die. Wolfram, depends on what you mean by we. Computational, irreducible, really, Ed. Yeah, I agree. Wolfram is just so earnest and genuinely wants to know the answer to question at hand. For him, it's not so much a debate, but as an exploration of different viewpoints on a topic. The fact that he can get someone to follow along for 4 hours while rambling down multiple tangentially related rabbit holes just shows how that genuine curiosity comes across and is respected by others. He just gets them to help him explore the topic. There is no loser. We all win by learning more. Fair. I think that's a little bit harsh. He was unfocused toward the beginning. The end was really good. And I would say that he didn't have it would just have taken another level of preparation and energy, stamina to really go hard at the end. So I'm trying to just skim this to see if anyone is supporting Stephen Wolfram as the winner or talking shit about Yudkowsky. I'm not seeing anything, but I think he did a great job. And yeah, but this is all true. This is all true. I will say the people who watch this kind of a debate are typically people who are worried about AI doom. So there's definitely a selection there. And I think a lot of people watching my videos on this so far have been big fans of the AI doom argument. So there's just not much of an audience for Wolfram. So I'd say it's 50-50. I'm going to give it to, actually, you know what? Screw it. I'm giving it to Wolfram because people are underrating how well he did. These comments do not reflect it. I am biased, but they're biased, and we need to stand up for the minority opinion. Some other really cool stuff.